Stacy. Welcome to the kitchen of my old Kentucky home. Today on Bourbon and Biscuits, we're going to be falling for apples. Let's get started. We're going to be making a recipe with apples today that is so easy you'll want to make it all the time. And when I was growing up, my grandmothers literally did. They made it in the morning, they made it in the evening, and as the old saying goes, they made it at supper time. Here's what we'll need. 5 tart apples, 3/4 of a cup of white table sugar, 1 tablespoon of butter, and 1 tablespoon of bacon grease. So now apples are abundant all over the United States, but they were brought to the New World after the peaches were brought by the Spanish. It said, you know, the old Johnny Appleseed, where he took his apple seeds and tried to plant them all over the country. So Kentucky's been enjoying apples for over, 200 years. And they just have a much longer growing season than the peach, and then the storage capabilities are just so long that it's just something that Kentuckians always had on hand through a long winter. Stories go that apples just wouldn't freeze, so people would put them in their root cellar and put sawdust in a box and then be able to keep these apples all throughout the season. Some of them were even able to eat them almost fresh in the spring. Anyway, like I said, when I was growing up, we had fried apples for breakfast, we had them for supper, great accompaniment to country ham and pork, of course, but even that Sunday fried chicken dinner, and a great little side dish for breakfast as well. Could use any apples, absolutely. There were like 8,000 varieties at the late 1800s, and as farming became more modernized, like we've lost, all of the varieties of heirloom tomatoes and things like that. So we've lost several of those old apple varieties, but we still have Jonathan's, Winesaps, Galas, and the Granny Smith. And the tartar the apple, the more acidic is really the best for this. So I had Granny Smith's and the Galas today. So all I've done, as you can see, is slice 5 apples, and we are just gonna take this to the stove with our bacon grease. I did cook up a mess of bacon this morning, but I always have my little jar in the refrigerator as well. Just need a tablespoon of that. And then we're gonna put butter in our cast iron skillet. We're gonna get that going, and then we'll add the sugar as that cooks. So let's get to the stove. So we're already here at the stove. I have brought my bacon grease up to a high heat in this pan. And I've got a secret about why you didn't see me pour it in. I'll tell you that in a minute. I'm gonna add the butter. Just let that get a little melted, a little brown. You don't have to use a cast iron skillet, but boy, it really just retains that heat, and I just think it cooks things in a more southern way. Okay, now we're gonna add our 5 sliced apples. And we're just gonna let these cook down just a moment before we top it with our sugar. So the secret that I was talking about is I had measured out some bacon grease to show for the recipe, but this skillet actually had the remains of the bacon grease that was left from the pound of bacon that I cooked off earlier. And my grandmothers would just leave the skillet on the stove from frying up bacon, and when they were ready that day to make their fried apples, they would just heat that sucker back up and start the recipe. So that's what I did too. And I'll save that bacon grease in my little jar for my green beans or whatever else I need during this week. Okay, once you have all your apples coated with that layer of greasy butter, you can also substitute lard in for this in equal quantities as well. And then we're just gonna take our sugar and pour it over the apples. Stir this around, and we're gonna let this cook for a little bit. We want these apples, some people like them really, really soft, almost applesauce quality, and some of them like a little more bite to them. I like somewhere in the middle. And I'll show you what that looks like after we've let these guys have some time to cook. So these have been cooking about 10 minutes, and I'm gonna say they're just how I like them. You can see that some of them look real squishy, mushy, and some of them look like they still have a little bite to them. You can let them cook a little longer. This is pretty much how I like them myself. So we're gonna turn these off and take them off and get them plated up. Okay, we're gonna let these apples cool down while Jessica uses another apple variety to make one of her famous bourbon cocktails.
With fall approaching and apples on the menu today, I decided to create a bourbon apple pie cocktail. So what we're gonna do is, in a cocktail shaker with ice, we're gonna do 1.5 ounces of Maker's Mark. I want to use a wheated bourbon because it adds a little extra sweetness. And then I'm gonna do 1 ounce of some fresh apple cider. We're gonna do 1/2 ounce of cinnamon schnapps. Gives it the nice baking spice flavors. And then we're gonna do 1/4 ounce of fresh squeezed lemon juice. And I'm gonna put in about 3 or 4 dashes of these black walnut bitters. I like a lot of bitters in my cocktails, so you can add a little more or less based on your preference. And we want to give all this a good shake. All right, that's nice and chilled, a little diluted, all mixed together there. And I'm gonna go ahead and just strain this into our coupe glass. And to garnish it, I'm just gonna take 1 apple wheel and just float it right in the center there. And that is gonna be our bourbon apple pie cocktail.
So Jessica, you know I'm gonna have to do it. How'd you like them apples?
I like them a lot.
Seriously, were they close to your family's recipe?
Pretty much exactly, I'd say.
Yeah. And
Just
you,
like home, pretty
right?
much.
And you had them for breakfast or
We
called supper?
pretty much, I think every time I had fried apples, it was always with pork
Yeah.
for dinner.
Right.
Yeah.
We
We
had
don't
them
usually
fried.
do it with breakfast.
Okay. We had them breakfast, fried chicken, lunch, just
Mhm.
whenever. But I thought about there's such a candy taste to them. Like you eat them for dessert, right?
Mhm.
Some people like how I save my sweet potato souffle to like a dessert at the end, and that makes me think of apple pie.
Yeah. So, what do you think? Does this do a pretty good approximation to tasting like apple pie?
It really does. I almost thought that you put allspice in it because that initial aroma is like opening the oven.
I think that the trick is the black walnut bitters with the cinnamon schnapps is what really makes it kind of like a baked good
Okay.
flavor.
Well, yeah. I mean, it is like drinking an apple pie in a glass.
Well, it certainly puts me in the fall spirit.
Well, cheers to that.
Yeah, cheers.
We'll see you next time on Bourbon.
And biscuits.
Cheers.
Cheers.